Prepare to turn, ordered George.
Preparing to turn,
answered Theodore. Theodore was helping George dock a big cargo ship. Slow down, called George. Slow down. Slowing, called Theodore. George whistled a big George whistle. It always felt great being in charge and telling everyone what to do. Start pushing, he commanded. George sure is being bossy today, thought Theodore. At last, the ship was safely at her dock. Theodore took a deep, happy breath. Now came his favorite part of working with George. Let's go home, shouted George. George's last order of the day. Wait. That's Foduk's emergency whistle, said George. And sure enough, Foduk was steaming towards the tugs, making his most important face. I believe I've located something beneath the harbor, he announced. What did he say? Said George. I think Foduk said he found something under the water, explained Theodore. You see, sometimes Foduk uses very large words. Let's go, ordered George right away. And off he roared, followed by Foduk. Oh no, groaned Theodore. Now I have to listen to more of George's orders. It's right under here, said Foduk. It's making some kind of emergency signal. I wonder what it is, said Theodore. I really don't know, said Foduk. It's a mystery. An underwater mystery, Theodore said thoughtfully. Well, we have to raise it up. I think I have an idea. We'll hook it with our anchors, shouted George, swinging into action. Follow me, Theodore. Well, Theodore didn't say anything. It was no use trying to tell George what to do. Theodore, said George, butting up against him. This way. But Foduk said it was over here, replied Theodore. Just do what I say, snorted George. All of George's orders felt like they were building up inside Theodore's smokestack, ready to explode. You find it yourself, George, he said at last. Wow, George was very surprised to see everyone always did what he said. Oh, there's probably nothing important under here anyway, he grumbled, as if he really didn't care. Let's just go home. Well, this was one of George's orders Theodore would gladly listen to. Wait! I've just received word on my radio, said Foduk, hurrying over. A big ship is heading right this way. Well, we were leaving anyway, said George. You don't understand, Foduk continued. That ship might be damaged by the underwater thing. I shall have to declare this an official harbor emergency. Now, an official harbor emergency is a very serious matter indeed. We can't raise this thing, said George. We can't even see where it is. I have a plan, said Theodore quietly. Well, let's listen to Theodore's plan, called Foduk, or we'll have to close the harbor. Well, said George, okay. But inside, he really wasn't very happy about not giving the orders. Theodore asked George to get Shelburne the sea barge, and Theodore returned, leading Northumberland's submarine. Theodore, frowned George, why did you ask me to get Shelburne? And what's Northumberland doing here? Northumberland will dive down and find the underwater thing, explained Theodore. And then Shelburne can raise it up with a special salvage crane. Well, right away, George could see it was a good plan. Northumberland, start diving, he commanded, getting his big voice back. Shelburne, directed George, start raising your crane. Shelburne began to raise his crane, slowly.
Hurry up,
Ordered George.
Northumberland, dive.
Well, Theodore knew Shelburne just couldn't be rushed. And Northumberland, well, Northumberland just hated loud noise,
Hey, my hat!
said George.
Oops. Sorry, George.
Said Shelburne. George could tell that everything was going all wrong, and this time he knew why. Theodore, he said quietly, just tell me what to do. I'm ready. Well, Theodore quietly sent Northumberland down to the bottom. And then he got Shelburne to slowly lower his crane hook. And the hunt for the underwater mystery began. Northumberland dove deeper and deeper beneath the inky waters of the big harbor. Up above, Fodak was listening carefully to the sub on his special radio.
I think,
Northumberland called to Fodak on his radio.
I think I've found something.
It was like nothing the sub had ever seen before. Nothing under the water or above the water either.
He found it.
Shouted Fodak.
Push Shelburne this way. Pushing. Pushing!
Soon, Shelburne felt a deep thunk on the end of his line.
You hooked it.
Radioed Northumberland.
We've hooked it.
Repeated Fodak.
Now, pull.
Shelburne began to pull up his cable.
It's very heavy.
He said.
Hold Shelburne steady.
Radioed Northumberland.
Hold Shelburne steady.
Fodak called to George and Theodore.
Holding steady.
The two tugs called as they muscled the big barge steady. Fodak could see the great ship making a final turn towards the big harbor.
We have to hurry.
He shouted. Suddenly, Shelburne's crane just stopped,
Something's stuck.
groaned Shelburne.
Northumberland, what happened down there?
Radioed Fodak.
It's caught under a rock.
Northumberland called back.
We'll have to move the barge around the rock.
Radioed Northumberland.
Tell us where to go, Northumberland. Over this way.
Radioed the sub.
Bring Shelburne closer to me.
Fodak called to the tugs. Well, George and Theodore didn't waste a beat of their engines.
Slow down.
Radioed Northumberland.
We're going to lose it. Slow down.
Repeated Fodak.
Turn a bit, George. Turning.
George was straining and smiling. Even though it was very hard work, it was very exciting.
It's free.
Radioed Northumberland.
Now, stop. Stop.
Ordered Fodak.
Stopping.
Stopping! Together, with Northumberland looking, Fodak listening, Theodore and George struggling until their bumpers ached, keeping Shelburne steady. And Shelburne giving one last mighty heave of his cable. or raised the underwater mystery.
Good work, everyone. called Northumberland. We got it!
George was sounding very excited. But what is it? Said Theodore. Fascinating, said Fodak, floating closer. I believe it's a satellite. They usually fly way up in the sky, around the Earth. But this one must have fallen into the ocean. Well, let's get you out of the way, Theodore said to Shelburne. The sun was almost setting by the time the tired tugs had brought Shelburne to his dock. George hadn't said a word all the way back. He'd been thinking hard about something.
I guess,
He said at last.
I guess I can't always give the orders.
You're right, said Theodore quietly.
From now on,
Continued George, I won't give any more orders. Well, not always, said Theodore with a little smile.
then you just wouldn't be George.
Added Fodak.
You're right.
Said George with a great big grin.
Let's go home.
I mean, do you want to go home now?
Let's go home.
Shouted Theodore and Fodak. George whistled his great big George whistle. Oh, it always felt great being part of a team. Theodore was taking his good friend Barrington Barge to the oil refinery. Barrington, said Theodore, today, when I finish moving you, let's play our special joke. Okay, Theodore, said Barrington quietly. That's the nice thing about barges, thought Theodore. They're always so nice and quiet. Theodore put a little extra puff into his pull. He couldn't wait to play his favorite joke with Barrington. As soon as Barrington had unloaded his load of big, long tubes at the oil refinery dock, Theodore hurried away, pulling the barge behind him. Where shall we hide today? He called to Barrington. Oh, you decide, replied Barrington. Another nice thing about barges, thought Theodore. They always go wherever you want. It felt great to be in charge of Barrington. It made Theodore feel bigger. Theodore set off to find a good hiding place with Barrington. It was time to play their favorite joke. This looks like a pretty good place to hide, said Theodore, as he pulled Barrington along. They were getting close to Owen, the giant oil rig. Whatever you think, said Barrington. Theodore began to pull Barrington behind one of Owen's great big pillars. Owen, whispered Theodore, don't tell anyone we're hiding here.
Won't tell anyone,
Bellowed Owen.
No, siree, Bob. Just watch how quiet I'll be.
See, Owen is a very noisy oil rig. Theodore and Barrington waited with big, sly grins. And sure enough, along came Petra, the pilot boat. Theodore and Barrington held their breath. The best part of the joke was coming right now. Petra knew that Theodore and Barrington always hid when they were finished work. It was their special joke. I wonder, said Petra out loud, where can Theodore and Barrington be? Petra looked this way and that way, but she didn't seem to see them. Owen, said Petra, have you seen those two?
No, siree, Bob,
Hollered Owen.
Oops. Oh, well, they told me to be quiet.
Well, Theodore started laughing, and soon Barrington was laughing too. And Petra looked around again, and then,
Surprised!
they yelled. Theodore rushed out, pulling Barrington behind him. There you are, said Petra. You did surprise me. Theodore and Barrington laughed and laughed all the way back to Barrington's dock. Tomorrow, said Theodore, we'll find a really great place to hide. Fine by me, said Barrington. So long, Barrington, said Theodore, and he headed home, still giggling a little as he went. What a great joke, he said to himself. The next morning, during the regular work meeting, the dispatcher turned to Theodore and said,
Theodore, today you will be moving Barrington, as usual.
Theodore's two toots said, Yes, sir. Theodore set off to get Barrington, swaying back and forth a little, the way he did when he was especially happy, already thinking of where he was going to hide this time with Barrington. I bet this will be the best day I've ever had, he said to himself. Now, as soon as Barrington had unloaded his big, long tubes at the oil refinery dock, Theodore said, Let's hide. Okie dokie, said Barrington. This time, said Theodore, we'll find a place we've never been before. Well, they found a little secret cove just beyond the big smokestacks. This looks like just the right size for us, said Theodore. Do you think someone will find us way out here? Said Barrington.
Oh, don't worry, Barrington, replied Theodore in his most grown-up voice. Someone always finds us.
Theodore carefully backed Barrington into the little cove and then squeezed in beside him. And the two were hidden by the rocks and trees around the cove. This is our greatest hiding place ever, said Theodore. Well, it wasn't too long before Petra came floating by, looking for Theodore and Barrington. Of course, she knew they were hiding. Theodore! Barrington! She called. Are you there? Shh! Theodore whispered to Barrington, and they both tried hard not to laugh. Theodore? Barrington! Petra called again. Where are you? Theodore, whispered Barrington. Aren't you going to pull me out now when we yell surprise? Oh, not yet, whispered Theodore. It seemed the more worried and nervous Barrington got, the more brave and excited Theodore felt. Barrington? Theodore? That's strange, she frowned. They usually don't hide this long. Theodore, said Barrington. Petra's leaving. Theodore moved ahead to look, and sure enough, Petra was going away. Oh, someone else will come along, said Theodore. And then he rumbled his engine a little, like he was getting ready to rush out and yell surprise, but inside he was beginning to wonder what would happen too. He wanted Barrington to think he was really good at jokes. Petra went to talk with the dispatcher. They always hide on me, and I usually find them right away, Petra was saying. It's our joke. But this time, I couldn't find them anywhere.
This is very strange, said the dispatcher.
And then he looked around as if he were hoping Theodore and Barrington would come floating by any moment. The other tugs could see that it would soon be dark.
Maybe they had an accident,
said Fodak.
Well, there is only one thing to do, said the dispatcher. I will have to declare them officially lost. I'll ask Constance, the Coast Guard ship, to search for them.
Everyone was very quiet after the dispatcher said that. They knew that sending an important ship like Constance to look for Theodore and Barrington meant that this was now a very serious matter.
Fodak, as you are the safety tug, said the dispatcher, please go with Constance and help her search. Proceed immediately.
Fodak whistled his most serious whistle and set off to meet Constance. I hope Theodore and Barrington are all right, said Hank. All the other tugs were hoping the same thing. It was now almost dark. The small cove where Theodore and Barrington were hiding was full of long shadows and strange night sounds. Now, Barrington, being a barge, is usually nice and quiet. How long do you think we'll have to hide? Said Barrington in a very quiet voice.
Not long, I think,
replied Theodore. Until tomorrow? Asked Barrington. Maybe, answered Theodore. Theodore? Said Barrington. Yes, Barrington. Is tomorrow a long time? I hope not, Barrington, said Theodore. I hope not. Both boats shivered. A cool nighttime breeze was beginning to blow. Just then, Barrington saw something. It's a light, he said. Someone is shining a light. Listen, whispered Theodore. Sure enough, someone was calling.
Theodore! Barrington!
That's Foduck, said Theodore excitedly. He's looking for us, said Barrington. Are you ready? Whispered Theodore. I'm very ready, Theodore, said Barrington. Theodore waited until Foduck was almost past them. Surprise! They yelled. Theodore rushed out, pulling Barrington behind them.
Where have you two been?
An angry voice said. Theodore and Barrington looked around, and there was Constance, the Coast Guard ship, and she was shining her biggest searchlight right at them. Constance, said Theodore, what are you doing here? Everyone has been looking for you, said Constance. Do you know how worried we all were? We were hiding, said Barrington with a great big grin. Wasn't it a great joke? Added Theodore. A joke, said Constance, as if she couldn't believe what Theodore had said. Well, it's certainly not funny. You will take this barge to his dock and report to the dispatcher immediately. And with that, Constance floated off with Foduck. Theodore pulled Barrington to his dock. I think we're in trouble, said Theodore. Why? Said Barrington. I don't know, said Theodore miserably. This is the worst day I've ever had. Me too, said Barrington. After Theodore had taken Barrington home, he returned to the great ocean dock. All the other tugs were asleep, but the dispatcher was waiting up for him. Constance said you wanted to see me, sir? Theodore said in a very small voice. The dispatcher could see that Theodore was tired and upset.
You'd better get some sleep now, Theodore, he said. We'll have a talk in the morning.
Yes, sir, said Theodore, and he headed off to his dock. But tired as he was, Theodore couldn't sleep. Why is everyone so upset with me? I hope I can see Barrington again. Further along the harbor, Barrington couldn't sleep either. I hope I can see Theodore again, he said softly. The next morning, Theodore was thinking of what he would say to the dispatcher. He decided to practice on Donald Dock. Maybe, said Theodore, Barrington and I hid too long? Uh-huh, said Donald. Is that why everyone was upset with us? Said Theodore. Uh-huh, said Donald. You see, uh-huh is all Donald ever says. It wasn't Barrington's fault, Theodore continued. I'm the one who made up the joke. Do you think the dispatcher will let Barrington and me work together again? Uh-huh, a voice said. But it wasn't Donald. Theodore slowly turned and saw that the dispatcher was looking at him. You mean, said Theodore, I can work with Barrington? Theodore, said the dispatcher, the reason we were all so upset was, well, we didn't know you were only playing a joke. You were gone so long we all thought you were lost. I guess a joke isn't funny if it makes everyone worry, said Theodore sadly. But can I work with Barrington again? Well, maybe my good friend Donald Dock has something to say about that, said the dispatcher with a smile in his voice. Uh-huh, said Donald. A little later, Theodore was taking Barrington Barge to the oil refinery on the other shore. It sure is a great day, said Theodore. The best day ever, said Barrington.